I now call the honourable member for Bradfield.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. There's been a lot said this week about the Qantas dispute, but beyond the tactical question of which industrial relations processes should have been used, there is a broader question, which is why has this government effectively abandoned the economic reform process, which in the aviation sector, as in so many other sectors, has delivered huge benefits to consumers? Because in effect, what we have is a government standing idly by while emboldened unions seek to dictate the way that Qantas should manage its business. Let's take a historical perspective here. For many years there was a government-mandated duopoly in aviation. TAA and Ansett were the only companies permitted to operate. One was government-owned, one was privately owned. This arrangement was pretty cosy for the airlines inside the club, but left routine air travel unaffordable for the majority of Australians. Quite correctly, in 1990, the Hawke government kicked off the deregulation of the airline sector and abolished the two-airline policy. The sector was opened up to new entrants, and there have been a series of them. Some have survived and some have not. They have included Qantas Mark I, Qantas Mark II, Virgin and Tiger. Airfares have dropped dramatically. Rather than being a luxury for the great majority of Australians, air travel can now be a routine part of daily life. The result of this deregulation process has been much more choice for consumers and much lower fares. Consumers are better off. Many more people fly and there are many more trips each year. In 1991-92, approximately 18 million passenger embarkations occurred. In 2010-11, approximately 48 million occurred, an enormous increase in less than 20 years. However, deregulation of the aviation sector has made life less comfortable for companies in the industry. That is the nature of competition. It creates pressures which industry participants must respond to. Just over 10 years ago, in September 2011, one of those two traditional duopoly airlines, Ansett, collapsed. It had a high cost structure, legacy work practices, a high degree of unionisation and an inefficient fleet. Ansett failed to match the more efficient new entrants. While Ansett did a poor job of responding to change, so far Qantas has managed its way through change effectively. But the management team of an airline must be ever vigilant. The airline business is a very tough one. It is highly capital intensive, with aircraft costing tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars each. Key cost inputs like fuel fluctuate sharply, and labour is a large cost component. The Ansett collapse shows what happened when a management team failed to adjust a company's operations to new competitive realities. Anybody who thinks that because Qantas has been around for the best part of 100 years, its future is guaranteed, is naive indeed. For Qantas to assure its survival, its management must be able to take the necessary actions so that Qantas remains a viable and competitive business in a fast-changing and ruthlessly competitive sector. As Qantas CEO Alan Joyce has pointed out, its TWU staff are paid 12% more than their equivalents at Virgin, and its long-haul pilots earn 50% more than their Virgin counterparts. Yet the unions are pressing Qantas for a commitment to, quote, job security. No company can provide its employees with greater security than it enjoys itself. A guarantee of job security from a company which was forced into collapse would be nothing more than a meaningless piece of paper. The current showdown between unions and Qantas is about whether Qantas will be able to maintain a viable operating model given the competitive pressures that it is facing. This is the playing out of a public policy direction rightly put in place over 20 years ago. It is a policy direction which serves the interests of the many, airline customers, including millions who today are able to fly when 20 years ago they could have not afforded it, as opposed to the concentrated interests of the few. But it is a policy direction which is now under direct threat from the Gillard Labor government. Mr Deputy Speaker, it was a tragedy when one great Australian airline collapsed after failing to adapt to a more competitive market. It would be a double tragedy if another great Australian airline is prevented from taking the necessary steps to secure its future because under this government the union bullies are back in control.